Hello, this is Jay Maxwell, and we are back with another episode of the Libertarian Uncensored podcast, going over all the posts on the Libertarian Uncensored subreddit. Let's get right into it. So first we have, study on cash payments to poor families found no statistically significant impacts on child development. The money did not make a difference, posted by Lemon Limelight, and they said from the New York Times, and they quoted the article, if the government wants to support children to thrive, it should give their parents money. The simple idea has propelled an avid movement to send low-income families regular payments with no strings attached. Significant but indirect evidence has suggested the unconditional cash aid would help children flourish, but now a rigorous experiment and more direct tests found that years of monthly payments did nothing to do with children's well-being, a result that defied researchers' predictions and could weaken the case for income guarantees. After 4 years of payments, children whose parents received $333 a month from the experiment fared no better than similar children without the help, the study found. They were no more likely to develop language skills, avoid behavioral problems or developmental delays, demonstrate executive function, or exhibit brain activity associated with cognitive development. I was very surprised. We were all very surprised, says Greg J. Duncan, an economist at the University of California, Irvine, and one of the 6 researchers who led the study, called Baby's First Years. The money did not make a difference. And yeah, I think that just goes to show you how, people need to work to be better. You just can't throw money at them, and that automatically makes them better. That's what a lot of progressives think. A lot of progressives think, if you throw money at people, everything will automatically become better. That's not the case. Just because people are given money, isn't automatically going to improve their life situation. It's like, the old what would we call it? Like the old axiom, teach a man, give a man a fish, feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, feed him for a lifetime. It's kind of like that, You just can't throw money at people and think it's automatically going to improve their lives. You need to teach them to improve their lives rather than just give them money. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell survivor, testified she met Donald Trump at age 14, from PalmBeachPost.com, posted by Helpful Feeding. And yeah, of course, Reddit's really pushing Epstein. I personally think that's good, but Reddit only cares because of Donald Trump's involvement. If Donald Trump weren't involved, Reddit would be yelling about how all the Epstein stuff is a bunch of conspiracy theories. But since the Orange Man is implicated, suddenly, they're obsessed with it. That just goes to show you, Reddit's religion at this point is basically Donald Trump bad. And that's pretty much one of the key tenets of their religion, along with pornography good and transgender good. Is Donald Trump bad's probably arguably the biggest one at this point, I would say. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Hexif and Qatar signed a memorandum of understanding which allows Trump to use the $400 million plane once he leaves office. It also went on to say that this transaction isn't an acceptance of any form of bribery, undue influence, or corrupt practice. Writing out "this isn't corrupt" means it's corrupt from thedailybeast.com, posted by Baton13, and that's a cross post from the Law subreddit. And yeah, personally, I don't really care how Qatar's gifting America a plane. But, I'm sure if it was Obama or Biden who was getting the plane, Reddit wouldn't care. But since it's the Orange Man, suddenly it's the worst thing ever. And yeah, that's why I really don't care for Reddit. They really have no value. The vast majority of Reddit has no values over this point other than Orange Man bad. I'm sure, if Orange Man's cured cancer, suddenly Reddit would think cancer, a cure for cancer was the worst thing ever. They'll say, oh, just because he cured cancer, now we're going to have overpopulation. Reddit will always find a way to spin anything anti-Trump. I personally don't really care for the guy. I never voted for him. But, it's interesting how just shamelessly partisan Reddit is at this point. And it's been that way for pretty much since he first started running for president, too. Then we have Trump admin blocks an investigation into Epstein money trail from Beltway.news, posted by CH4Locks, and that's cross-post from the Law subreddit. And yeah, personally, I don't think he should be doing that. But again, Reddit only cares about the Epstein stuff because Trump's implicated. If he wasn't implicated, they wouldn't care at all. Even though, a lot of their team might be implicated too. But, they only care about the Orange Man. They don't really care about anything besides the Orange Man. It's kind of like, people say Trump's cult worships him, and I would say a fair degree of them do. But, the Trump anti-cult almost worships him just as much. He's pretty much all they can talk about. That's why you see on subreddits like this one, like not like 10 out of 15 headlines are all mention Trump, and they just can't shut up about him. And they'll say, oh, he's the president of the United States. I don't care if he's the God Emperor. You don't have to talk about him 24/7. But of course, Reddit, they just can't. He just lives rent free in their heads. Then we have Apple's iOS 26 text filters could cost political campaigns millions of dollars, top GOP group warns, from BusinessInsider.com, posted by Donald Key, and that's the post from the technology subreddit. And yeah, personally, I hope they do, because I think politics is nothing but grift, and hopefully these text filters take out all the political spam text that both the branches of the Uniparty throw out. I personally don't care for either of them, but if they want to text you, that's fine. That's freedom of association. But I personally do think these filters that could help reduce political spam would be very good. I personally would like them. Not everyone likes them. I'm sure a lot of people who are really DNC shields or RNC shields might miss getting all the spam text from their political party, but other than that, I'm pretty sure the vast majority of people would like them and view them as an improvement. Then we have Trump warns Canada, U.S. trade deal at risk if it recognizes Palestinian statehood, posted by Donald Key, and that's a cross post from the Mayor McShee subreddit, and that looks like a tweet from Donald Trump. Well, Canada just now says backing state over Palestine. This will make it very hard for us to make a trade deal with them. Oh, Canada. And yeah, I personally don't really care for how up Israel's ass Trump is. I'm really don't think the U.S. needs to get out of Israel, and they shouldn't be giving Israel any money. If people want to send money to Israel, that's fine, but people shouldn't be forced to send money to Israel if they don't want to. And a lot of the U.S. Budget does go to Israel, and that's something that I personally don't really care for. Javier Milei, the president of Argentina, is another guy who I agree with a lot more than Trump, but he's up Israel's ass as well. He's up Israel's ass so much they actually converted to Judaism. And yeah, I personally think if people want to be pro-Israel, that's fine, but they shouldn't be forced to give money to Israel through forced taxation if they don't want to, and that's what Trump's pretty much doing. And yeah, he pretty much is in their pocket. He married his daughter off to a hardcore Zionist and Jared Kushner. And, Kushner, that's pretty much as Jewish as you can get in a name that doesn't end in Stein or Berg. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have reactions after Powell's decision equals Trump raging, posted by Ragnar OKXG, and that's a true from Donald Trump. Jerome Too Late Powell has done it again. He is too late and actually too angry, too stupid, and too political to have the job of Fed chair. He is costing our country trillions of dollars in addition to one of the most incompetent or corrupt renovations of a building in the history of construction. Put another way, Too Late is a total loser, and our country is paying the price. And yeah, Donald Trump, he might shit talk Jerome Powell a lot, but you have to remember two things. One, he is the person who ultimately appointed Jerome Powell in the first place, and two, he'll just complain on social media. He won't get rid of the Fed, like how Andrew Jackson got rid of the National Bank. Trump won't actually get rid of the Fed like he should be doing. He'll just complain on social media, and that's pretty much all Trump does is just just jerk himself off on social media rather than actually do a lot of stuff. And yeah, that's why I think he's pretty much a do-nothing president. Reddit thinks he's doing all this stuff, but in reality, he's really just jerking himself off on social media, and Reddit is going ballistic because of that. But, he really doesn't do too much other than that, I would say, despite Reddit obviously thinking he's literally Hitler. But, I personally think, he's just a do-nothing president who just likes to jerk himself off rather than actually take any action. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next, we have some needed satire to address the corrupt and authoritarian actions of the current administration, and that's by Tom 13. That's a Tom the Dancing Bug comic, Trump-friendly and merger facility for kids, and that looks like a bunch of that's a bunch of shit-lib satire. Personally, I don't really care for shit-lib satire, but if Redditors want to share that, that's fine. If you want to think Colbert getting canceled is the worst thing ever, that's fine. But, I personally don't think Colbert getting canceled really is that much of a big deal, if you think, I'm sure if you think he's that funny, you already have Reddit to do pretty much the same thing as Colbert, and yeah, you don't need people like him anymore. And yeah, that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Smithsonian removes Trump from impeachment exhibit in American History Museum from WashingtonPost.com, posted by Ref Libman. And yeah, that sounds like something petty Trump would do. I know one of my clients at one of my jobs is a government client, and they have to have the True Social in their email signatures now, so that's something else petty he would do. But yeah, Trump. It's really nothing. It's if he does something, it's usually just to jerk himself off. So if if he wants to remove him, if he wants to tell the government to remove himself from the impeachment exhibit, that's fine. But ultimately, I think the big problem here is we even have state-funded museums in the first place. I think the libertarian position is everything should be privatized, and that includes the Smithsonian. Then we have Trump gaggles with the press, posted by Empty Row 5585, and that's a YouTube video from the White House. And yeah, personally, President Trump's always arguing with the press, so I don't think there was really any need to share this. But ultimately, the libertarian position is share whatever you want to, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Trump just released his plan to revoke birthright citizenship. It's worse than imagined from Slate.com, posted by Donald Key. And that's a cross post from the law subreddit. Interesting, looks like it's posted by Slate themselves, because, as I stated in the past, a lot of the media outlets these days exist to just share their content to Reddit directly from their own accounts rather than have third parties share them, because that's how they want to control the narrative. And a lot of websites that have realized that traditional media like Slate exist just to control the narrative and have eschewed them. But Reddit, they'll give it 20,000 upvotes since they say Trump bad, and that's pretty much all Reddit cares about at this point. Regardless, personally, I think birthright citizenship, I think citizenship is something you should more have to earn than be entitled to. But of course, Reddit, since Trump's against it, they are automatically going to be against it. They're automatically be for it as well. So, if you want to be for birthright citizenship, that's fine. But, I'm sure if Trump was against birthright citizenship, or if he was for birthright citizenship, I'm sure Reddit would be against it, because, Reddit has no values other than being anti-Trump at this point, as I said earlier. And let's see if there's anything new. Looks like we're going to wrap up there. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.